Hey everyone, thanks for checking out this video. In this one, I'm going to show you 5 mistakes that I often made when I was getting started in woodworking. Even a couple that I still make here and there. So hopefully publishing this video is going to be that mental note that I need to not make those mistakes anymore. So without further ado, let's get to those 5 mistakes. Right, and here we have what looks like a beautiful cherry blanket chest, and it really is. I'm really happy with how it turned out. But in order to get these panels, I use 1/4-inch cherry. But at the time, I didn't fully understand how dados and rabbets and that kind of stuff works. So what I did was just slap the cherry on the back of really kind of what is a bit of the face frame, I guess you could call it. I don't know what you'd call this. So I basically just lined it with this cherry plywood, which I didn't edge band. I thought that I could get away with sanding it and then putting finish on it, which really just kind of ruins that internal look. So definitely a mistake that I made early on. Also relating to edge banding, we see some aggressive sanding along here, which also shows one of the issues that I have with sanding, which I'll get to in just a moment. But you can see that the iron-on edge banding just doesn't look quite right on this, especially when you start to really sand it down. And another edge banding issue is just how rough it can be when you don't cut it clean. So you can see some of the edges here. And I had originally used an edge banding tool to trim these off, and it would just tear out because the edge banding that I ironed on was pretty low quality. I now, when I do use that type of edge banding, I just use a knife instead and along a straight edge, or I just use the router. All right, so now we have a couple of examples of me sanding through the veneer on a few pieces of plywood. So here we have it on, luckily it's in the workshop, but still it's a nicely designed cabinet with nice drawers, but sanded through the veneer on the outer part here. And here we have a further example of sanding through the veneer. And this was also the combination with the edge banding where I wanted to get a nice smooth edge without cutting it. So sanded through the veneer. Again, this is in the laundry room, so not super concerned about it, but you really see how orange it gets. So sanding through the veneer in the middle of a piece of plywood is one thing, but sanding along the edge, you get these just ugly. So I've since learned from that. So here we have a mistake that I made very recently on a cabinet that I'm working with, where I looked at the instructions online and I thought that I could get away with the 105-degree half overlay hinges, which I originally bought. But when it came to actually fitting these, I found that I needed the 110-degree full overlay hinges. So luckily I'll be able to use the half overlay on a few future projects, and the 110, which I had to rebuy for this project. Another hinge failure were these soft close hinges that I had originally wanted to use on this blanket chest for my daughter, but not only do they look a little ugly, very difficult to install, and I did not design the blanket chest to use these. So they didn't fit, yet I'd already padded out the blanket chest a little bit, and I can't remove that easily now. But I opted instead for these hinges, which I cheaped out a little bit on. So you can see a little bit of bend given the weight and the way that I mounted these. And you can even see one of the holes that I mismatched back there. And in order to accommodate for those hinges, I also had to route out the back of this blanket chest to make room for it, which also impacts the overall look and feel of what was originally meant to be an heirloom quality piece. So a little unfortunate. So relating to cutting to fit, we have some shelves here where the shelf pins that I'm using actually would allow the shelf to go right to the edge. But we've got this pretty significant gap here. We have a pretty significant gap on the one up here as well, because what I would have done at the time was basically plan the entire shelf, cut all the pieces, finished all the pieces, then piece it together. So again, a definite mistake that I've learned from since doing this. Well, mostly learned since doing it, because I repeated it very recently, just last week, when it came to the shelves that I'm building for this upper cabinet, where I had trusted all my measurements, and based on the piece at the top, I had cut all my shelves, which are now pretty close to where I want them. they could probably be about 1/8 of an inch wider to get a really good fit. So I am using different shelf pins on this one that do stick out, they do protrude a little bit here. But I do wish that I had waited to cut these shelves and cut them about 1/8 of an inch longer. And another mistake that I made was really buying a lot of unnecessary and inexpensive tools when I was getting started. So didn't waste a lot of money on it by any means, but buying low quality tools when getting started, especially ones that you really don't need on the current project, is totally unnecessary. I'm very much of the mindset now of wait until you need it, then buy the best that you can afford. So during that process, I have a whole video that I'll link above where I go through 10 tools that were my worst tool purchases so far. And a little bit controversial, but it has seen a lot of views. And so a few of the ones on there, like a very low quality paint sprayer that just doesn't work well unless you dilute the material significantly, a rotary tool. And at the time I wanted to buy a good Dremel, but I didn't know exactly where I would need it. So rather than wait until I needed it, then buy a good quality Dremel, I bought a cheap one, cheap knockoff. Same with hand planes. It was just kind of like, well, what are the hand planes every woodworker has? And so again, rather than saving up for a good quality hand plane, when I actually needed it, I went out and bought all of them and just bought low quality versions. So I know I could invest some time and money tuning these up, but I'd rather just wait until I have a project where I really want a good quality plane that I can go out and buy it. These cheap plastic tools from General, and I don't know why the General name is on it. I don't know if it's the same General that is the power tool manufacturer, but low quality. The General moisture meter I have come around on a little bit. Same with the Craig Multimark. I do use this for like surrounds and overhangs and that sort of thing. It's still not a good square, but it does have some functions for like blade depth and again those surrounds. This strap clamp from Mastercraft, which is a Canadian brand, just awful quality plastic. It becomes a mess of cables. I do want to upgrade to the MLCS Merle clamp sometime soon. So the jigsaw, which was in the video, I've come around hugely on. So the jigsaw was one where I wasn't getting clean cuts at the start, and it made my list of bad purchases. And after spending more time with it, after some feedback on that video, I dialed in with the right blade, got the right speed going, and I get perfectly clean cuts. So I came around on that. Again, moisture meter and Craig Multimark as well. So thanks for watching this video. Be sure to leave a comment below with some of the mistakes that you made when you're getting started and those mistakes that you still tend to make. I know that I'm still making those mistakes with hinges, although I tend to build up a little bit of a collection of that, and sometimes cutting things like shelves a little prematurely before the final product is there. Be sure to give me a thumbs up, subscribe if you haven't already, and another video will be out soon. Thanks for watching.